Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video today. If this is your first time here, please think about sticking around, liking, commenting, and subscribing. For everybody else who's been part of this journey, thank you so much. I love your comments. I love your suggestions. I love you. Thank you for being here. And I hope you guys are enjoying spectacular 31 days of Halloween. So, what am I going to talk about today? Well, let me give you a hint. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. If you have grown up in England, UK, or even some places in the United States, you will know that this is a poem about how school children can remember what happened to Henry VIII's wives. That's right, because we had to make up a poem because that man went through wives like some people go through socks. Yeah. So we are going to talk about his second wife, Anne Boleyn. Now, the reason I'm talking about her is because people thought she was one of us, meaning she was a witch. What a lovely tale. I don't know if it's true. So, a little bit about Anne Boleyn. So, no one is sure of her birth date. There are people who say she was born in 1500, others say that she was born in 1501. However, there is no accurate record of her birth date. She married Henry VIII and only had a 3-year relationship with him before she was beheaded. In that time, she was pregnant 4 times and had one successful birth. That would be of Elizabeth, who would eventually go on to be Queen Elizabeth, aka the Virgin Queen. And unfortunately, Anne lost 2 boys and had a stillbirth of another child, which I believe was a girl. Um, Anne Boleyn had a interesting life. She was part of Catherine of Aragon's court, which was Henry VIII's first wife. And at that time, Catherine was older, but so was Henry. It just didn't seem like Catherine would ever be able to give a male heir to Henry. So Henry decided to divorce his wife. Catherine of Aragon did not appreciate that one bit. And even though she was thrown out of her home, she claimed to be the rightful queen until her dying day. Anne Boleyn was, like I said, part of her court, and she was a very sophisticated woman, very worldly. She was a person who studied at French court and could speak French fluently. She was also a highly religious person. The reason why people believe that Anne was a witch starts with the fact that Henry VIII was infatuated with her. So much so that she just wasn't an official mistress, which actually would have been accepted. She wanted to be his wife, and she refused to have any personal relationship with him until his wife was out of the way. The Catholic Church would not allow a divorce. So, what did Henry do? Well, what a king would do. He declared himself to be the head of a new religion that he created called the Church of England. And that meant that he could make up his own rules. He was so infatuated by Anne that he was not only willing to set aside his wife, but change the religion of his country, his followers, and actually was excommunicated from the Catholic Church because of his actions. He made a lot of enemies, and his lust for life burnt out quickly. As I said, Henry and Anne were only married for 3 years. They got married in a secret ceremony that only a few people were a part of. The official wedding didn't happen until later when Anne was already pregnant, and that would be with Elizabeth. What happened with Anne? Why was she beheaded? Why was this woman that Henry was obsessed with beheaded by his orders? There are several theories to this. What she was officially charged with was adultery, incest, and treason. She was accused of sleeping with another man and her brother, both who were put to death and both who claimed their innocence. Anne was not given a fair trial and was basically found guilty with no real evidence. The only reason why treason was brought up is because Anne had made some offhanded remark about the king dying, and it had nothing to do with her plotting his death, but it had to do with his activities that were very physical, that could have caused a lot of harm, especially at his age. He was a robust man, and before he was the portrait of a heavy man that we all know today, he was a very athletic person. One of the miscarriages that Anne had was a direct result of Henry being knocked off of his horse during a tournament. He was unconscious for over 2 hours. Anne heard the news and thought he was going to die. Out of her panic, she had a miscarriage. This was a horrible time, but it wasn't a time for Henry to stop looking at other people. Anne expected that Henry would not cheat on her, as he had done clearly in the past with his first wife. Anne found herself being in the same exact position that she was a few years earlier. A woman at her court named Jane Seymour, who would eventually become the third wife of Henry VIII, was openly being favored by Henry VIII, and he was already trying to replace her. By the end of her life, Henry hadn't spoken to Anne in weeks. Even after her pleas for sparing her life went upon deaf ears. Anne died with dignity, and she still wanted to praise her husband and saying that he was a good man, a godly man, and God save the king. It was one of her last words. So, why do people believe that Anne Boleyn was a witch? It all started from this whole situation that was fabricated in order to murder Anne, and so somebody else could step in and give Henry a son. Anne was not going to be able to produce another heir. She was deemed useless. So she had to be gotten out of the way. And Anne wasn't going to go quietly. So they couldn't just ruin her reputation. They had to kill her. And then they had to make her reputation even worse. Stories started coming out at the time of her execution, who was witnessed by hundreds of people, that Anne had a sixth finger on one of her hands, the mark of the devil, or the witch's mark. Other people said that her stillborn child was actually a demon, and instead of it living, they tossed it out the window. Anne Boleyn was also accused of witchcraft post-mortem, saying that she had bewitched Henry. That was the only reasonable explanation for his actions of setting aside his wife and not just having Anne be an official mistress, but having to be the wife of the queen. And not just that, but he broke from the Catholic Church. This battle is still going on today between the Church of England and the Catholic Church. The belief system, the structure to this day is still in question. But the most ironic thing is people believed that Anne actually cursed the line of succession for Henry VIII. Henry VIII would have one living son named Edward. Edward, unfortunately, was only on the throne for a short amount of time before he too died. That meant that his sister Mary and his sister Elizabeth would both be queens. This also started off a succession of women who would be queen over and over again in history. Victoria, and now Elizabeth, who has been the longest reigning monarch in the world. They believe with her last breath, instead of praising the king, she cursed him because he had no male outside of Edward. And his two daughters, who at some point he disowned, both of them, at least once, both of them became the most powerful women in England. Anne must have worked some sort of magic spell for that to happen. Couldn't just be charm, grace, intelligence. It had to be witchcraft. And sometimes I wonder if she was one of us. Very powerful, very strong. She had an intention. She focused on the intention, and she got what she wanted. She got to be the Queen of England. Her daughter got to be the Queen of England. However, there was a price to pay, which was her life. Many people believe that Anne actually haunts the London Tower and Hever Castle, Hever, Hever Castle. Many people have claimed to see her ghost, especially in the Tower of London, walking up and down the hallways in the last dress that she wore, without a head. People still feel like they hear her screaming and begging for her life as she did the nights prior to her execution. It very well could be that Anne is still at the Tower of London today, pacing around and hoping for a different outcome. However, I think she probably moved on. Maybe that's just like a recording of something that you see, but Anne herself has moved on. She got what she wanted. Now, did she do it through witchcraft? Who knows? It might just be another nasty rumor that people spread in order to make her seem like a villain. But at the end of the day, she was victorious. What do you guys think? Do you think Anne was a witch? Do you think her ghost could still haunt the Tower of London? Leave your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear them. Love talking about witches and ghosts. All right, everybody, you have a lovely evening. Stay safe wherever you are. And remember, every single day is a gift. Use your time wisely. All right, bye for now.